Today we're going to make a ceramic stamp. We're going to start out by taking a thick coil that's about 1 inch in diameter and tapping it on the table to make sure the bottom is flat. We'll do this periodically over and over again. Notice that my clay currently has some cracks in it. That's okay for now. At about 2/3 of an inch up from the bottom, I'm going to start using my dominant hand to pinch it slightly, and I will use my non-dominant hand to rotate the clay. I don't want to apply any pressure to the clay with my non-dominant hand. You'll notice that this starts to create a handle. Next, I'm going to smooth out the clay on the handle by brushing my thumb up from the base. This will not only create a smoother surface, but it will also help to get rid of the cracks along the sides. Next, I will start pinching about 1/2 inch from the top to create a knob at the top and smooth that area out as well. Take a look at the bottom and note if there are any edges keeping it from being a circle. Roll it lightly on the table to clean up the sides and reinforce the circular shape. We'll give it a tap on the table again just to make sure the bottom is still flat, and alternate between tapping and reforming the edges. Next, we'll do the same thing to the top. At this point, if you're doing this as a project with a group of people, make sure that you take a second to carve your initials on the top so that you can tell them apart. You'll have to let the clay rest once it's shaped to become leather hard. This can take a couple of hours to a day depending on the humidity of the air or if you put it in a bag. We'll wrap them up loosely in a bag and come back to them the next day. We want the clay to be leather hard so that it's easier to carve into, but harder for the clay to lose its shape. While we wait for the clay to firm up, we're going to sketch about 3 to 5 ideas on what our stamp will look like. When making your sketches, keep the following things in mind. You want to keep it somewhat simple because you don't have much space, but it should be unique so that it doesn't get confused with someone else's design. Avoid using basic shapes by themselves like hearts or stars, but try to create a design that is specific and meaningful to you. Avoid using letters and numbers, but if you do, remember that you'll need to design them backwards. When you actually use your stamp, it will be a mirrored reflection of your design, so letters and numbers can sometimes be confusing and problematic for the designer. Lastly, avoid using thin lines. The thinner the line, the more likely it is to break, and the less likely it is to show up. Focus on creating shapes rather than lines, and make any lines that you do use very thick so that they're easy to carve. Now that your clay is firm, we can get back to work. It should feel firm to the touch, but not at all chalky. Let's clean up the bottom. Hold the base and push down on the table while swirling the bottom on the table in a circular motion. This will clean up any cracks, smooth the bottom out, and be your last check to make sure that the bottom is flat. Once the bottom is smooth, you can roll the sides of the top and bottom one more time just to clean up the sides. Now let's add your design. Use a pencil, ceramic tool, or an X-Acto knife to lightly sketch your design on the clay. Make sure that you're as gentle as possible and using light pressure in case you make a mistake. If you do make a mistake, swirl the bottom again on the table to reflatten it. Once your design is created, you'll want to start to carve into the clay. We want our design to be about 1/8 of an inch proud, meaning set off of the base. We will carve away the negative space from the outside. Take your time with this. It's easy to accidentally remove part that you actually want to keep or to cut yourself. Smooth out the base with your finger or any clay tools. Carefully inspect your design for any loose pieces of clay and make sure to remove them from any edges or cracks. My top was lopsided and cracked, so I'm going to trim the top a little bit. Now that you have your design completed, we can do this to get rid of your initials. Since your design is unique, you shouldn't have any issues figuring out which one is yours. To finish up, we will create ridges on the handle to create a better grip. Be gentle when doing this so that you don't break it in half. I like to use a dull pencil for this, where I lightly draw the lines, and once I know that they're straight, go over it again and again to make them deeper. As you go, clean up any clay that pushes up against the sides. Once your stamp is finished, inspect it once more to make sure there aren't any loose pieces of clay, and remove them while you still can. Once these pieces go into the kiln, you won't be able to make changes to them. When they come out of the kiln, they will be dry and white. This is known as bisqueware. As I mentioned, this is a permanent, unchangeable stage of clay. We will now glaze the stamps. Be sure to choose a glaze based on the picture of what it will look like afterwards, as it changes drastically once it gets fired in the kiln for the second time. You will glaze the whole handle, but be sure not to get any glaze on the bottom where your design is. This is known as a dry foot. If the glaze touches the kiln shelf, the two will fuse together. Leaving this part unglazed will not only help it to be quickly and safely loaded in the kiln, but it will also help absorb ink when you use it as a 2D stamp. Once your stamp goes through a second time, known as a glaze fire, you will have a stamp that can be used on both 2D and 3D art.